Welcome back to Sunday Sound Off on Kings of Columbus on the podcast. Doug Lamereese and Bill Landis wrapping up Ohio State's win over Northwestern, and we're not going to get to it today, Landis. Right? Indiana's Ohio State, that's coming, but that's for another show.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll touch on some of it because we have a lot of questions about Ohio State's cornerbacks that I think are not necessarily framed through the lens of Indiana, but I think people are certainly wondering about Indiana when they ask some of the questions and have some of the concerns about that position. But yeah, we'll do a much larger and thorough breakdown of Ohio State versus Indiana later on in the week, both here and on Kings of the North.
Yeah, so this is talking to our folks as we do every Sunday with the texters, 614. I can't even remember the thing. I'm in a hotel near Notre Dame, and I'm still tired.
I got it. It's 614-662-4509.
We have a ticker at the bottom on the YouTube show that tells you it, and I started to say the number right as it fled off the screen, and I was like, well, there goes that. Neither you and I were at the Northwestern Ohio State. We have to be honest about that. I was at the Notre Dame game. You were at home in the bunker taking everything in, which is a good way for us to do that for KOTN. But we did watch it, and we did correspond with our dedicated, educated, loyal tech subscribers who ground us in what Ohio State fans are thinking about. And so we can have a nice conversation here, Bill. So what are the folks pondering? And by the way, there was something that when I was lying in my hotel bed at 3:00 in the morning, rewatching the entire Ohio State Northwestern game, you had me looking for something. So just know that I was in my hotel room by myself thinking about something that Bill Landis made me observe. And we'll talk about that.
Oh, I'm interested in that. Okay. Yeah, I think the majority of the vibes were layered with some concern about the cornerbacks. I think look ahead spot, good win, took care of business. Like they went down 7-0 and then scored 31 straight points. It's not like they sweat it out. They win against Northwestern in Wrigley Field. So there was a lot of flush it and let's move on to the part of the season now where every game is going to be an absolute banger, which I think is the proper probably point of view overall. I did enjoy this. This is I thought a very funny summation of what we saw on Saturday, sort of relative to the rest of the season and what happens moving forward, from Evan, who said, "This game could have been an email." So
yeah,
I think
yeah,
I think it could have been. Right?
Yeah.
We don't need to make too much of it. I don't think. It just sort of was what it was. And Ohio State 131-7. It's like, okay.
Hey guys, went to Wrigley. Ohio State won. Lots of Buckeyes there. It was fun. Chad. Yeah. No, and that's one of those, again, like if we if we're going to settle into any boring good, like boring good in Wrigley is a pretty good boring good, I think.
Yeah.
And there are a couple things that I thought popped up that I think are reasonable to question. There was some goofy stuff, like if the Jeremiah Smith catch isn't overturned, the game starts a different way than it did, But again, this is a little bit like there's just such a difference to me between games where maybe a team doesn't look spectacular, but still wins by 4 scores versus, hey, we didn't look spectacular against an overmatched opponent and we were tied in the fourth quarter. And so this is nowhere near that. So then I think I agree with the general vibe here.
Yeah. So there was, from Jason said, Bucks took care of business, no injuries, no major mistakes, solid performance. We're on to Indiana. Alex said, thoroughly annoyed with all the chatter in the first quarter from the broadcast about how Northwestern, quote, thinks they can win this game. Ohio State started slow, but by no means was never not in control. Okay performance and a look ahead spot. Move along. Tomorrow, meaning today, Sunday.
Yeah.
Starts a big week for the Buckeyes with Indiana coming to town. So there was a lot of that, but I don't mention those to be dismissive of the what I think are very fair and obvious cornerback concerns for Ohio State. So I guess if we want to dive into the game, do you want to start there or do you want to start somewhere else? I think there were a lot of
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, there were a lot of variations of like, what's up with the corners? Are they good enough? Is Indiana going to torch us, kind of thing? So I'll read off a couple here, and we can talk about what we saw, what we thought. Ezra said, not a performance worth raging over, but I continue to vote relatively low on the national title confidence poll that Doug sends out to our tech subscribers on Fridays, right? Because yes. I'm not sure you can win multiple games against top teams with these cornerbacks. They and the defense in general just give up too much. Corbin, I'm worried the corners are going to get torched next week. Nate, are the corners playing down to their opponent, or is this a serious concern? And then Joseph asked like a little spinoff of that we can also talk about. Should Jermaine Matthews play more? Not sure what's up with Denzel Burke, but it feels like Oregon identified a flaw in his game and everybody else is copying that formula. So those are 4 folks who chimed in on the corners, and we got like 200-ish responses for the Sunday sound off. And I would say at least half of them had something to do with the cornerbacks and what's up with that group and what it's going to mean for Ohio State moving forward.
That Natty Faith scale that I do send out to texters every Friday, scale of 1 to 10, just how it's not necessarily do you think for sure they're going to win, but just like I feel good about their chances. Like, are they good? You know, lots of crazy stuff can happen. It was a 7.8 going into the Northwestern game. It had been as high as like 8.2 or 8.3 at various times this year. So it's still decently high. So one thing, and I didn't count snaps, but there definitely was more of a rotation than there had been, I think, at least earlier in the year. I don't think we're down to the greatest argument I ever had with an Ohio State coach was when Kerry Combs said that they were going to rotate Denzel Burke in. Not Denzel Burke. Now I'm doing it wrong the other way. Denzel Ward with Marshawn Lattimore and Garyon Conley. And I was like, you always say you're going to rotate. You're not going to rotate. He was like, yes, we're going to rotate. And then they did rotate. And it's because Denzel Ward was going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So he was worthy of playing with 2 guys who were going to be first-round picks the year before him. The play where Denzel Burke gave up a 3rd down crossing route to Bryce Kurtz, which was one of the not great plays, they took him out. He was out. He came out the next play, and Jermaine Matthews came in for the rest of that drive. And there were also times, I think, when Jermaine Matthews was in for Davis and Igbinosun. Looking at the snaps, it got to blowout territory, so that affects it certainly. But Denzel Burke played 46 snaps. Davis and Igbinosun played 42, and Jermaine Matthews played 36. It feels like they're getting certainly more to that, but then also the point you made when we were talking about it a little bit on Saturday night was like Jermaine Matthews didn't necessarily play great either. So then what?
Yeah, I don't know that any of the 3 cornerbacks who played the majority of the snaps before the backups fully went into the game played all that well. But Jermaine Matthews has been playing. So he played 35 against Nebraska, but that was the game where Ohio State did not have Lathan Ransom when they were mixing and matching personnel at the nickel position and safety positions, and Jermaine Matthews was part of that. He played 15 snaps against Penn State. He played 40 against Purdue last week, and he played 36, as you said, this past week or yesterday against Northwestern. And that's not merely going into the game as a backup. He is rotating into the game pretty early, and I think that will continue. I like Jermaine Matthews a lot. We talked about him a ton, right? I don't know that what we saw against Northwestern where guys got behind him a couple times is super indicative of the kind of player that he is. And I think what's lacking for Ohio State, maybe less so from Davis and Igbinosun, but I think from Denzel Burke in particular, is just physicality at the catch point, just fighting for the ball, making plays on the ball.
Yeah.
And I do think Jermaine Matthews brings a pretty good competitive streak to that position. So I'm with anybody who would want to see him play more moving forward, kind of despite what was a bit of a lackluster performance against Northwestern. But I also think the coaching staff is there. To your point, they pulled Denzel Burke off the field. It was the touchdown drive, the second drive of the game. They hit the they hit a 21-yard pass down the sideline against Burke, and then later in that drive hit the 3rd and 10 on the crosser against Burke. There was another completion for 22 yards, I think, on that drive. That was between Jermaine Matthews and Caleb Downs.
Yes.
And that was honestly the bulk of what are the corners doing. There was more later on in the game, but it was that drive in particular. I think people were really kind of pulling their hair out. But I think Jermaine Matthews is part of the plan moving forward, I guess, to answer the question in a long-winded way. Should he play more? Yes, he kind of already is, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell against teams like Purdue and Northwestern. But would you expect next week it's a 3-man rotation through 2 spots, or is it short of that?
Yes. I guess it could be a case where maybe they don't do it unless one of those two starters gets beat early. Like if Denzel Burke and Davis Igbinosun start well and like get off to a pretty hot start against Indiana, then maybe they don't put Jermaine Matthews in there. But I think they have Jermaine Matthews chin strap snapped up, standing next to Tim Walton, ready to go into the game if one of those Indiana receivers gets down the field against Davis Igbinosun or Denzel Burke early.
And you think Indiana throws back shoulder as well as any team in the country?
I think they are the best back shoulder throwing team in college football, which is like a very weird thing to say about a team, but they're so good at it. And it's like it's not their entire offense. It is a large chunk of their offense is really well timed back shoulder throws down the sidelines from a pretty accurate quarterback in Curtis Fork and a couple of receivers who are up for the challenge of being in contested situations. So, and I think anybody who spent any time watching Indiana this year would come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. So just people need to know that they do have real dudes at receiver. Elijah Surratt's their main guy. He has 38 catches on 62 targets. Omar Cooper Jr. has 24 catches on 41 targets. Miles Price has 30 catches on 36 targets. And Miles Cross has 25 catches and 34 targets. So they do. They have Surratt, especially, as a guy who will go up and do that. And there does just seem so Davis Igbinosun fights too hard. He had another pass interference call. But then he also had like a nice deflection, I think, on a third down where he was all over the guy, right? And he made the play. I don't want to try to read too much into body language, but sometimes it does almost seem like, I guess I am reading body language. It's like there'll be a sideline ball to Denzel Burke where it just doesn't look like that he's like fighting with every last fiber of his being for the ball, and then the catch is made and he just kind of like walks away. And I don't know. I think there just might be almost a subconscious thing for Ohio State fans. And I think he's a very proud player who, probably once is flushing the play that just happened. Yeah. But I'm not going into Amir Williams territory. Is that the basketball guy?
That is the basketball guy.
Center.
Yeah.
I did ask him one time, why does it look like you're not trying? Like, I know you probably are, but just seems like you're not. Because that was the only thing that any Ohio State basketball fan cared about at that point, was like, why does it seem like you're not trying? So Denzel Burke's not there, but I think there's just like a vibe a little bit when he gets beat sometimes. So you're going to get beat on some back shoulders, and is some component of this, do you think are they putting corners on islands a little bit more as they bring more pressure and get after the quarterback with different blitzes and stuff a little bit more than they were in the beginning of the year? Because again, this is the whole push and pull of this. If you're playing with more safety help and then you're bringing just a 4-man rush, but now they're clearly, Sonny Styles was a missile at times on Saturday. It's like, okay, now we're putting it on the corners. I don't know. Is this also just part of it? Any corner is going to get beat if he's left in one-on-one coverage a lot.
Yeah, we got some questions about that too. Eric asks, we are getting pressure, but our coverage is not holding up, or DBs are allowing too much space against inferior talent. And I'm really nervous about how the Indiana team might expose that. There were some more philosophical questions, I think, about blitzing in general. Maybe we can save for just a second. But I do think there's something to it, especially in the first quarter of that game. I was looking it up. So Ohio State did blitz a lot. There was a 50% blitz rate in this game, according to PFF. That's pretty high for what Ohio State has been the last few years. That's actually very high for what Ohio State's been the last few years.
Sometimes they're more like third, right? They're like
35%. Plenty of games where they've been under 30. Yeah, 30%. Okay. So, and there's been more since the Oregon game, but I don't think quite this high. It was interesting to me, Ryan Day said in his post-game press conference that he thought about taking the ball first, which it runs counter to what they normally do. If they win the coin toss, they defer and take the ball in the second half. But he thought about taking the ball first because he was worried about Northwestern doing exactly what it did, which was holding the ball for 13 minutes on its first 2 drives. And they didn't. They deferred, but then it was like the defense went out super aggressive to like try to take the ball back immediately, which I thought was interesting. It's like you could have just taken the ball, right? It's like there's like a little bit of a push and pull there. I think they are very cognizant of how teams. I don't think every team's going to play Ohio State this way, but when they play the teams like Northwestern's, like Purdue's, they're not going to see anybody like that moving forward. So maybe it's a moot point. Although Michigan probably will try to do it. Michigan will try to. Michigan will very much try to shorten the game.
Are there any teams on their schedule left that are kind of like Purdue? Oh, the defending national champs are definitely like Purdue.
Yeah, which is like so Northwestern wasn't snapping the ball until there were like 3 seconds left on the play clock, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I think Ohio State's defense was pretty impatient in the first quarter of that game. So against the Blitz in the first quarter, Jack Lausch was 3 of 4 for 56 yards. The rest of the game, he was 7 of 14, so 75%, 50% the rest of the game. And I do think in some of these moments where the very egregious, obvious corners getting beat plays happened, it was send the blitz doesn't get home, corners are on islands, they're not tremendous in man coverage kind of thing, right? So yeah, they very much go hand in hand. That's like an obvious thing that's kind of been the predominant conversation since the Oregon game is getting coverage and rush to be synced up a little better. I thought for the most part prior to this game since Oregon, that had been pretty good. And then at least in the first quarter of this game, it was a little bit of a step back, I think, because the coverage was bad, but also like the pressures that Jim Knowles was sending, I didn't think were super effective and like not getting home. And Ryan Day talked about that after the game too, like being more efficient in the way that they blitz. They've been working a lot with the linebackers and safeties about that, because you will watch a play where it's like they send 6 and all 6 guys just ran right into a defender or right into a blocker. Yeah. It's like, well, what does that do kind of thing? So there was definitely a component of that, I thought, in some of the downfield passing plays that Northwestern was hitting.
But I also thought maybe late in the game they were finding it a little bit, because Sonny Styles had 2 sacks, right? He was giving me a little bit of Shazier vibes in the second half, a little bit. There's nothing I like better than Ryan Shazier vibes, but like there's a little like getting home a little bit more. And then they had their name for this. They had a blitz where they sent Cody Simon and Arvell Reese through the same hole. But like Cody Simon went first and Arvell Reese went second, and the back picked up Cody Simon, and then Arvell Reese, like there was no one to pick him up. And that seemed like a good thing that kind of worked. And I thought, I still feel like as much as they've done that more since Oregon, they're still working it out a little bit, but I actually thought they progressed in that area in the second half. I was like, okay, I could see them doing some of that stuff against Curtis Rourke next week.
Yeah, they got better at it for sure as the game went on. I think that's right. And that's actually been the case for like all these games. Even last week against Purdue, I kind of felt like that was happening. I think that Northwestern probably hit a couple throws that it hasn't hit all year down the sideline against some of those looks. So like there's a part of me that thinks just like, well, tip your cap, I guess, to a guy making a heck of a throw or receivers, but like especially that AJ Henning catch down the sideline between Jermaine Matthews and Caleb Downs. Like that was a heck of a catch. I don't know if that was a defensive
and that wasn't like
a guy breaking a play.
It's just like that was between a zone, right? That wasn't. There were a couple of them where it's like, okay, that was a guy getting beaten man coverage. That was Matthews was up in his area, and then he dropped back, and then Downs came over. But like even on that play, Downs came over like super aggressively, and it felt like Jermaine Matthews kind of came over like, oh man, I got beat. And it like there's a like when Caleb Downs is getting to a ball, he is getting to a ball with ferocity. And it's different when you're coming to help as opposed to your corner running with a guy. You're right next to him. It's hard to be as ferocious. But I think there's a little bit of that. I think they could use a little Caleb Downs in the entire secondary of like a reminder of it's a fight out there. So whatever you're doing, fight. Except for you, Davis and Igmanosin, you fight 20% less because you're
fight a little less.
Early.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And which part of me is a little like flustered by that idea, because the corners remain very good tacklers. Like they're not afraid to mix it up against the run, and like they are very physical in that area of the game, but they are not physical in my opinion at all when it comes to like fighting for the ball at the catch point. And you'd think it'd just be more like a holistic approach to playing cornerback, and it's like, well, can you bring a little bit of the mentality you bring when you're defending the run or tackling a guy in space to covering a guy 25 yards down the field? And then if they do, maybe that's the answer to everyone's concerns.
Yeah. Maybe Davis and Igbinosun is getting yelled at so much in practice for being too physical that the other guy's like, man, I don't want to get yelled at. So they're just not physical with the balls in here.
Yeah, I don't want to have to wear boxing gloves at practice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I did think, they're all this, right? The pressure and the coverage is connected, but I thought they were getting home with some stuff. And Sonny, I don't know if there's Sonny stuff. I thought you can still feel Sonny figuring it out in real time. And I thought it felt for stretches that he was involved on every single play. And sometimes he was involved because it was like, well, I think he was in the wrong gap there. Okay, there goes the running back. But that again to me was like Ryan Shazier sometimes, especially when he was younger, and Sonny is still young at the linebacker position. Every single play was doing something. And like 80% of the time it was something good. And 20% of the time it was something like, I don't know if that was the right thing, but it was something. And I thought Sonny was super active in a very effective, if not always efficient way.
Yeah. So we did get a couple of Sonny texts. I forgot to grab one. I apologize, but it was something to the effect of it seemed like once the defense started unlocking some stuff, it was because it kind of was using Sonny as the weapon to do that.
Yeah.
And then we got a text from the 321 area code that said it seems as though Sonny Styles is coming into his own and improving week by week. As he gains experience, he appears to be playing more instinctually and freely, which I 100% agree with that. And I think we talked to Sonny last week on Wednesday night, and I think just like talking to him, you can pick up on that. I don't know that Sonny Styles ever lacks for confidence, because when you're 6'5", 240 pounds and move the way he does, I'd imagine you're pretty confident most of the time. But right. Me too. So, but he was definitely struggling, I think, early on in the year, right? We had plenty of conversations about like, are we sure Sonny Styles should be a linebacker? And
it was like the number one defensive conversation. Remember when the corners were playing great in the first half of the season? The number one defensive conversation was what's up with Sonny Styles. Those were the days.
Is it too much to say now that he's the most improved player on the defense from week 1 till now?
Oh no, I don't think it's too much to say that. I think it's. I mean, honestly, right? Wasn't he kind of a negative for the first month?
Yeah, I think.
And then he graduated to like a neutral, and now he's a positive. Now he's kind of like a sledgehammer. Now he's a missile. So that's a very. But again, there's like a 17-minute preamble to a Jim Knowles question in here. But what if one of the things you have to do to free up Sonny Styles and let him do all the things he can do is put the corners on islands more often, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, and all the coverages when they're playing off and they're playing zone and they're giving help and they're not giving up anything big, but they're not getting any pressure. There is at least some part of this that is related to that. I would not like excuse everything happening with the corners as just that, but it's where do you want your weaker area to be?
Mm-hmm.
And in the first half of the year, the weaker area for the defense was in aggression, right? Was our effective aggression, especially against, and now it's like, okay, well, it's this way. And by the way, I do just want to, like Bryce Kurtz, the Northwestern receiver who was beating Burke on a couple plays, has been out for a couple games this year, but he was back healthy. And then AJ Henning is a guy he was at Michigan at one point, and he's been at Northwestern for 2 or 3 years now. They're actually okay. Like Northwestern is not a super talented team. Those guys, I don't know that they're 5 steps below the Indiana receivers. Like Bryce Kurtz is pretty good. So if anybody's walking away as an Ohio State fan, like say, oh my God, the Northwestern receivers were giving us trouble. It's like, actually Northwestern's okay there. There's some other spots where they're not okay. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I kind of think like Northwestern's receivers are better than Penn State's receivers when they're healthy. Like,
I agree.
And not as good as Oregon, not as good as Indiana, maybe not quite as good as Nebraska's, but like in the top half of receiver talent, Ohio State will have faced throughout the course of the regular season.
Yes. I think Bryce Kurtz might be one of the 14 best receivers in the Big Ten, right? Like just again. So it's not they're not terrible at it. So
yeah. So no, it's a point where, again, it's not to excuse what we saw. I don't think, just because like it's more about. I think what you were trying to like get at is like the mentality of the position and those situations. It's like why does it seem like you're not fighting, I think, tooth and nail is the way you said it, like to get the ball when it's in the air. Like I don't care who the receiver is at that point, right? You can be playing against Randy Moss for all I care. You should at least be trying to get the ball. And it doesn't feel like Ohio State's corners are doing that. At a high enough clip right now. And if they don't do it against Indiana, like Indiana's going to complete a lot of passes. Doesn't mean that Indiana will definitely win the game, but Indiana, I think, will move the ball via the air if Ohio State's corners play similarly next week. So
I wonder if it'll bring it out. Like Elijah Surratt is a fighter, isn't he? Like he
is. And I think that, like, I guess I say this, and we all saw the Oregon game, right? And like, there is something about the matchup that I think can bring out that mentality. But the last time Ohio State played a team, and I don't think Indiana's passing attack is very good. I don't know that Indiana's receivers are quite as good as Oregon's. Although maybe collectively it's a slightly better group. But there's not like a Tej Johnson. I don't think
it's hard. There's not a Tej Johnson, and Evan Stewart like had the best game of his Oregon career against Ohio State. That's like who Evan Stewart is every week.
But I think Indiana, like whereas Oregon has like 2.5 guys who really worry you, I think Indiana might have like 4 who are legitimately very good.
Yeah, and Curtis Rourke is a surgeon in a lot of ways.
Yeah, just playing really well. Anyway, we can talk more about that later on. But I think you hope anyway, right, that the challenge of stopping that would bring out the best of what Ohio State's cornerbacks have to offer. But I also like I get the other side of that. It's like what have we seen, including the Oregon game and since the Oregon game, that tells you we're definitely going to get that? Because I don't think I've seen anything that would give you a ton of confidence.
No. Very reasonable questions for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's disastrous. I don't think they're teetering, but it needs to be better.
It just needs to be. I think they just need to win a few more of those situations than they're winning right now. It's not that like I'm not expecting like go out and hold Indiana under 200 passing yards or else kind of thing. It's just like there are going to be moments where the balance of the game might come down to whether or not Denzel Burke can make a play on the ball, and it's like go make the play on the ball kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's not one of those where guys in the secondary are turning and looking at each other and putting their arms in the air because they blew a coverage, or where somebody is running 7 yards past a guy because they're not fast enough to keep up, which is like maybe some of the questions about that, like after the Evan Stewart performance in the Oregon game. But like it's more they're there and not making the play. So,
yeah. So let's I want your, because you seem to feel pretty good, I think, about what they're doing, generating pressure, and I think I do too. We got this question from Khaled, which I thought was really kind of smart,
our guy,
insightful. Does it seem to you that Jim Knowles still hasn't figured out the art of blitzing? Knowles doesn't seem to time his blitzing from a situational point of view, or even pre-snap. Most of his blitzes seemed telegraphed. Or maybe the bigger question is, do you think he's converging to the right balance between aggressive and conservative?
So I thought it was another game of no wasted players. I'm obsessed with this now since that Oregon play where they dropped 4 defensive linemen into no man's land and let no pressure happen and put every corner on an island and 5 one-on-ones across the board and have 4 defensive linemen covering air. So to me, in the pursuit of simulating pressure and not letting them know what you're doing, sometimes the result is you have guys covering air or rushing into oblivion. And so I think I'd rather telegraph stuff. But have all 11 guys impacting the play. So again, just that blitz, again, it's a common blitz, right? Of like send 2 linebackers through the same gap, but I don't know that I'd seen that a ton from Ohio State. And I thought Styles was getting home a little bit more. I mean, there is just some stuff like, for instance, if people were watching the Wisconsin-Oregon game, Wisconsin like stayed in the game at the end of that because they had like a really effective corner blitz on 3rd down, right?
Yeah.
And so like sometimes it really shows up when you really pick the blitz that flummoxes an offense on a key down and it shuts down the play. So I'm okay with the continued pursuit of it. I think. I understand, and you would think with all these veteran players and Knowles being here now for a while that it would be humming on all cylinders, but it's in some ways a pretty substantive change since Oregon, and I still feel like they're working towards something good. So like I'm okay with it. Are you?
Yeah, I'm mostly okay with it. I think Khaled raises a good point about some of the situational stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, like I thought earlier in the game they were probably too aggressive. I think part of the reason Northwestern held the ball for so long in the first quarter plus was Ohio State being a little too aggressive when it probably could have just sat back and gotten off the field a little bit earlier. But I think generally philosophically, I do agree with bringing more pressure. I just don't. I think they hardly blitzed at all against Oregon. There was a lot of simulated pressure, and I just don't know that those looks have been super effective for Ohio State. So why not just send the extra guys then and hope that you get there? I do think it continues to be very much a work in progress on doing that more efficiently, whether that's avoiding a guy trying to block you or like when you get to the quarterback, don't run past him. They still do that a little too much. But I do feel like they're ironing some stuff out with this. And I don't know if you're a team that doesn't blitz heavily and then all of a sudden you start to ratchet that up a little bit. I don't know that just starts to look awesome immediately. I do think you need to build a little bit of a body of work with that before guys start to get really comfortable. And I think the linebackers by this point seem fairly comfortable. Like Cody Simon has given me some like 2022 Tommy Eichenberg vibes at times, the way they use Tommy as a blitzer that season. And I think Sonny Styles clearly is kind of morphing into that a little bit too. I think they got to get the defensive lineman when like a defensive lineman is the guy who is kind of let loose by a blitz, like that defensive lineman has to make a play. There's not enough of that happening. I think like Jack Sawyer's missed like 5 sacks in the last 3 weeks because he has the quarterback lined up and he just misses them. So, and that there's been enough of that across the entire defensive line that I think it's something that the group collectively needs to iron out. But I don't know that Jim Knowles struggles with the art of blitzing. That's sort of like who he is and what he does. I think definitely early on in his time at Ohio State, you could question the timing of it, and whether or not he was feeling out the game enough when he was calling those blitzes, and then the result of that was just like dialing back the aggression almost entirely. So now they're ramping it back up, and I think they're a little bit better about it now than they were like earlier on in Knowles' tenure here. Maybe it's not still perfect, but I view it as the correct course of action because they have to affect quarterbacks more. They're not going to go through what they're about to go through and try to win a national championship if quarterbacks are just going to sit back there comfortably and be able to, like, no secondary will cover any competent offense effectively for the entirety of a game if a quarterback is just going to stand there and be able to deliver passes down the field. So keep getting better at it, but I think they are kind of on the right path. Is my view.
There was a play I wanted to remind myself of. I think it was in the third quarter on a 3rd and 8 where Ohio State put like 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, and the look led to Caden Curry on the edge being unblocked because there was like a linebacker next to him, and the left tackle took that inside guy, and Curry met Cody Simon at the quarterback, and they sacked Jack Lausch on 3rd and 8, and it was the look. The look created the sack. Caden Curry didn't have to do anything, and Cody Simon got through in the middle, and that was, I thought, like an example of, again, it's just everybody had a job. Nobody was wasted, but it was a look that was effective. So I actually am feeling pretty good about the progress here for real.
Yeah, no, I am too. Like I get any reticence to like embrace the idea of this defense being markedly better than it was the last time we saw it against a really good offense in Oregon. Like, it's just not something you're going to be able to fully wrap your arms around until you see it in a similar situation again. But I think this weekend is a similar situation. So whatever questions we have, I think are going to get answered. I'm not promising that they will get answered in a incredibly positive way, but I think they will get answered. We'll know, I think, very much what this defense is about by 3:00 next Saturday.
Yeah. And I'll be curious how much maybe, and the hard thing is when you're playing a better, more veteran quarterback, then maybe you are more likely to run simulated pressures and stuff like that because you really want to change their eyes. And if you think that if Curtis Work is going to be a surgeon and just move down the field and hit throws, then all of a sudden you want to drop JT Tuimoloau into one of his passing lanes, right? So maybe there is some of that stuff that you've got to get even more exotic when you're facing efficient passing games and veteran quarterbacks, which can be frustrating when it doesn't work. But I think they probably, because like even the pressure itself, like Curtis Work will handle pressure, right? As long as it's not in his grill in 1 second. So there are going to be times where you're going to have defenders where he doesn't expect them to be. So quite the old chess match, Bill.
Yeah. He's a good quarterback who's, he's good against the blitz. He's good against pressure. We can talk more maybe later in the week about some of the things we saw when Indiana played Michigan a couple weeks ago. But I do feel like in this game felt like a continuation of it. I think Jim Knowles and the defense are sort of laying the groundwork for a fairly comprehensive, multiple defensive plan against Indiana. With some of the stuff we've seen structurally, some of the pressure packages, some of the way that it's been varying coverages the last couple of weeks. I'm not saying all of it has been awesome. I think there is a little bit of feeling out of like, all right, how are we when we do this? How are we when we do that? Should we do more of this? Should we do less of that kind of thing? To put them in the best position to have a good plan for Indiana. So I don't know. I have a small level of confidence, I think, that the defense will have a better showing against Indiana than we saw against Oregon, just because of some of the plans that have been put into place the last couple of weeks. But we'll see. We can dive into that more, I think, later on in the week.
And just so people know, obviously on Wednesday on Kings of the North, we'll do a huge Indiana Ohio State show, but also Wednesday on Kings of Columbus, big Indiana, Ohio State stuff. We'll probably do a lot of questions from you guys and that kind of thing. But Wednesday, KOTN, the other feed, Kings of the North, for that huge moderate-sized northern audience, we will do basically an entire Ohio State, Indiana big game breakdown, probably have an Indiana beat writer on and really dive into that because, again, this is like the third top 5 matchup in the North involving Ohio State. So we're going to give you all the Ohio State, Indiana breakdown you can handle this week.
Yeah, for sure. Almost everything was about the defense. Almost all of the offensive questions were about the play where Jeremiah Smith tweaked his ankle. I did not grab one specifically. People were really fired up about that play, and I get it because I kind of thought it was a play like outside of like normal football activity. And like it
wasn't a football move.
It was not. Like I do feel like it was a dirty play.
Yes.
What was your view on what happened there?
No, I thought so too. I mean, like a grab and twist like that. Sometimes you see that more like at the bottom of the pile, right? That's like in a run. Haven't we seen that in a run play? It's like, and here's a guy as the running back's ankle is sticking out of the pile, appearing to attempt to remove his foot from his leg. And this was just out in the open on a tackle. It just was not. I don't know what the defense would be of like, oh no, he was just making a tackle. It's like that's not, and he was already down. Like that's not how tackles made. So yeah, I thought it was dirty too. So I don't know. I mean, I guess you send that in. I don't know what the next step would be in something like that. I guess I understand it if they didn't see it on the field to like call a penalty on it. But and then I did think so. We saw Jeremiah Smith go off and get ice on the ankle and stuff. They ran like a little option play, kind of run play to him later in the game, and I thought he didn't look quite as fast as he normally would look.
I thought that if he was 100%, he might have scored on that play. Like he might have gotten the edge and scored on that play, right? So I think the fact that they kept him in there should kind of calm everybody down about his availability / effectiveness against Indiana. But yeah, in that moment, he definitely looked a touch slower than he normally does because the thing that I find maybe most remarkable about Jeremiah Smith, and there are a lot of things you can find remarkable about Jeremiah Smith, is that in addition to being so big, so strong, so good at the point of the catch, like an incredibly dangerous downfield threat, like with the ball in his hands, he's unbelievable. Like a guy that big should not be able to turn some of the passes that he turns into huge gains so easily. He's incredibly explosive. Like it's a bit ridiculous, and I feel it's unfair. I think that he has sort of all of that to his game. Like that catch should not have gone for 68 yards. Who does that?
No, it's sort of like what if Chase Young was Ted Ginn Jr. It's like it would be that. So
well said.
I don't even know what to say anymore about that guy. But yeah, I thought it was an unnecessary football play. And then I would like to hear like Ryan Day's answer about something regarding that on Tuesday and whether they pointed it out to somebody.
Yeah, he'll definitely, if he's not asked about it, he does like his radio hit on Monday night on 97.1 The Fan. If he's not asked about it there, he will definitely get asked about it Tuesday. Because, and I don't know, can you? I guess you could go back and like retroactively suspend a guy if you wanted to. That guy, I can't even remember his name from Northwestern.
He targeted his foot. Can you target someone's foot?
Yeah. He like deleted a social media account, I think, because he was getting a lot of messages about that play. It was I thought it was definitely a dirty play. Like I did not think it was a great look for Northwestern. But I don't know if anything will come of it. But Ryan Day will certainly be asked about it. I had one more.
I have an offensive thing, by the way. I have an offensive thing.
Yeah,
the thing that Landis has me looking for at 3:00 in the morning in my hotel bed.
Yeah, so I had one more thing from the texters that I wanted to mention on the offense, and then we can talk about your thing. It was a question about Emeka Egbuka, and it was from the 314 area code. It said, "Is there any chance that Emeka is coming back next week?" Meaning, like being a part of the offense. He sort of disappeared, and Emeka Egbuka does only have 4 touches in the last 2 games. So part of me feels like it's almost intentional. Like when they play big games, Emeka Egbuka gets the ball. And when they don't, I think they maybe on one hand, like seek out opportunities to not overload him with touches and exposing him to hits. And I also wonder if they try to hold back some schematic stuff for him. But like when they played Oregon, he touched the ball 12 times. I bet he touches the ball double-digit times against Indiana.
So Purdue game, receiving targets, Jeremiah Smith 7, Carnell Tate 7, Emeka Egbuka 3, but he only had 1 catch. And then against Northwestern, receiving targets, Jeremiah Smith 6, Carnell Tate 5, Emeka Egbuka 4, but he only had 2 catches. And they also had the play where they tried to set up a throw for him that wasn't there. So one thing is, more Carnell Tate is good, especially in that Northwestern game. I mean, I think we all could have predicted that. Carnell Tate deserved to have a showcase opportunity in his hometown, and he did that. And again, now we're getting back into like 2015 territory of like, why doesn't this guy get the ball more? Why doesn't this guy get the ball more? It's like, I want Jeremiah Smith to get the ball more. So that the last couple of weeks and right now on the season, receiving targets, they're tied. It's 66-66. So Jeremiah Smith had to catch up. So do you agree that Jeremiah Smith should be option A in the passing game?
Yeah, I think they should be 1A and 1B. But I don't think like either one necessarily takes a backseat to the other.
So I am, and again, they play different positions. You can move guys around. They're different style receivers, but I agree with you. Big game Emeka is probably a thing. You couldn't see the coverage. I don't know why that wasn't there. I get the announcer said that Northwestern just played it well when they tried to set up Emeka for the pass. So I like the idea of that. We always say we don't mean trick plays, but it's like actually kind of we do mean trick plays. Like try some trick plays. So,
but that also set the drive back too. That was the same drive where Jeremiah Smith dropped the ball in the end zone, right? It was the same drive.
Yeah, because that was the first down play, and then Jeremiah was the third down play. And it's like, that was a great point because that's the equivalent of a deep shot. You're trying something, and then it's like the minute it doesn't work, and like now then it was 2nd and 15, and then it was like, what are you doing? So it's like more trick plays, and then it's like, why didn't you stay on track on your drive? You should have run the ball for 5 yards. So it's a hard balance. Sometimes there's no way to be right, but I'm okay with it. And frankly, at least in Saturday's pecking order, I mean, if Brian Hartline had a sheet it said like, what are we going to do? Get Jeremiah Smith the ball because he's the greatest freshman receiver in college football history. Get Carnell Tate the ball because it's his hometown, and then Emeka's third. So,
there's a
big game.
I think so too. And I think we've even seen stuff the last 2 weeks like the things that they've had Brandon Inniss do a time or two are things that I think Emeka Egbuka will do, which is like they ran a play last week against Purdue where Brandon Inniss was lined up at running back. And they faked the sweep to Travion Henderson and then threw a wheel route to Brandon Inniss out of the backfield. It's like they'll do that with Emeka against Indiana. So I'm not worried about him getting touches. I think there's a play volume conversation that contributes to that. Ohio State only ran 57 plays. I was looking this up at 3:00 in the morning on Sunday morning. This was the third game this year where Ohio State has had fewer than 60 plays. They also had 3 games of fewer than 60 plays last year. And in the 4 years prior to that, they had 4 total. So 6 in the last 2 years, 4 in the 4 years prior to that. And that's clock rules, a lot of clock rules changing. But it's also Ohio State's methodical pace, which we've talked about. And they just play kind of slow sometimes. And I think that contributes to a little bit of the feeling of unease. Like Ohio State scored 31 points in this game. There was some conversation I saw, and I always hesitate to say like everyone's talking about this, and it was like maybe like 2 people who were talking about it that I saw on Twitter, but that Iowa scored 40 and I think Indiana scored 44 or something like that against this Northwestern team. Indiana scored that many in a game that was 27-24 in the fourth quarter. And Iowa scored that many in a game that had 29 combined possessions. It was an insane get back and forth game. And Ohio State ran 57 plays and scored 31 points and probably should have had, I don't know, another touchdown. They had 2 drives stall out in the fourth quarter, right? But they had the ball 8 times when they weren't trying to run the clock out, and they scored on 5 of those drives. So,
and one they didn't score on was Jeremiah Smith catching the ball one-handed in the end zone that then wasn't a touchdown.
Correct. So I think from a drive efficiency standpoint, they are fine. Their lack of really putting the pedal down from a pace standpoint contributes to the game. I think at times feeling a bit sluggish, but like they're moving the ball and they're scoring touchdowns. They don't have as many possessions or plays as they typically have. I do wonder if they'll. I mentioned this with Austin, I think last week, the week before. If they're, again, like I don't think the teams like really save things as much as we want to give them credit for, but if they are going to change up the tempo at all in some of these bigger games moving forward, like to try to use tempo as more of a weapon. Well, and honestly, playing slow and controlling the game is a weapon. It was like Michigan's entire recipe for winning a national championship was like hold the ball and play awesome defense. So it's not a bad way to go about your business. It's just like you're used to seeing Ohio State routinely put up 40 plus points, and right now they're averaging I think like 37. So they're just playing slower, and maybe they'll play faster against some better competition.
And after the deep ball conversation we had, and especially deep ball touchdowns, when you're not dropping in and a 65-yard touchdown bomb or 2 every game, that affects that too.
Yeah, I have not tracked how many like scoring drives of say like 5 or fewer plays Ohio State has this year compared to years past, but I bet there's been a pretty steep decline in that. All right, what's your thing? What was on your mind? What were you thinking about?
So I was watching Will Howard's follow through on his deep passes because you saying, right, you thought he kind of short armed some deep ball sometimes. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah. I think that he like pushes the ball and there's not a lot of like whip to his throwing motion.
I thought he was almost, it's like one of those when you're golfing and you're not keeping your head down and then you do it and you like keep your head down for 4 seconds after your shot. I thought he was following through. Like I thought he was exaggeratingly making sure that he did that. And I thought he threw a lot of really nice balls down the field. And I thought there were 2 throws where he didn't do it. And you could see the ball sail and flutter on him a little bit. One was because he had a defender in his face, and one was because he didn't get his feet set. But otherwise, I thought it was like, oh, they worked on this. And he was doing it. And then on the PFF big time throw stat that we cite sometimes, which is basically, it's subjective, but it's tight window, high value, high difficulty throw down the field. He didn't have more than 2 big time throws in any game this year. Do you know how many he had yesterday?
I actually didn't look. No, how many did he have?
5. He didn't have 2
tracks.
at any other game. So, like, I was just, like, freezing Will Howard arm whip and being like, oh, Landis fixed him. Good job, Bill. So I thought and, like, good spiral, good, like, some of that deep ball where it, like, turned over and was dropping in the bucket a little bit. Like, I was like, okay.
I thought it looked better. I thought the 2 times it didn't were, like, there were reasons why. He is not a off-platform throw guy. He's not a scramble to his left, throw across his body. I can't believe he got that much velocity on the ball kind of quarterback. He either needs to be, I think, like rolling to his right with some momentum and throwing a little bit naturally that way, or have his feet firmly underneath him to drive the ball down the field. And when he's moving to his left, he's not going to get the ball down there. You're going to see, I think it was the play to Carnell Tate where the ball just kind of fluttered on him, and then Carnell Tate didn't have much of a chance to catch that ball. And like that, again, like that's, no quarterback is perfect. That is where Will Howard, I think, comes up a little short. But I thought, for all the conversation we had about it, and especially some of the mechanical stuff that Ryan Day was talking about, which was more actually footwork related than it was arm motion related, it looked pretty good, I thought. Like even the throw to Jeremiah that he didn't catch, I thought was a great throw. The throw to Carnell Tate, he had to die for, but I thought that was a really good throw. The ball to G. Scott down the seam or the middle of the field, I think, was Will Howard's best throw of the year. And then he had some tight window stuff too. So like I thought it was a little weird, like in the broadcast at times, like, oh boy, risky throw by Will Howard. I was like, I thought it was awesome. What are you talking about? Like it's
the Jeremiah Smith throw in the middle of the field, right?
It's like you call it risky, I call it accurate. There was a lot of defenders there, and he threw it to his guy. So I thought it was, I know, like efficiency wise, I guess he wasn't quite at the 75-80% mark that he has been lately. 15 of 24, 63%, but
good PFF overall grade though, with some of those big shots and stuff.
I thought he actually threw it pretty well. Like I thought he threw it like in a way that was very encouraging, or maybe very too strong, but pretty encouraging.
And no turnover worthy plays according to PFF. So you know, the Oregon game, for instance, he had 38 dropbacks and they said 1 big time throw. This game, he had 23 dropbacks and 5 big time throws. So that's quite a deal. Penn State game, 28 dropbacks, 1 big time throw. So Nebraska game, 21 dropbacks, 2 big time throws, but also 2 turnover worthy plays. So this is 5-0. I thought it was really good, Will Howard.
Again, like PFF grades are whatever you want them to be, right? I don't think you take them as gospel, but they're instructive. This was Will Howard's first game of having an overall offensive grade of 90 or above. His previous high was 81.9 against Western Michigan. He was a 90.5 in this game. And he's also he has back-to-back weeks of being a 90 or better from a passing grade perspective. He was 90.2 last week. He's 90.6 against Northwestern. Again, take it wherever you want. Take it with a grain of salt for sure. But I think we're seeing him continue to grow as a passer.
Were there any offensive line comments or questions?
No. The only one, I'm trying to think. The only one I saw that I did not grab, so I apologize for not having the name, was that someone said, like, I didn't think much about the offensive line, which I guess means they played pretty well. So I don't know. Did you have offensive line?
I didn't think the right side played great. There was, so I mean, when you really think about it, there were, and usually like the running back has to take care of one guy, but there was a 3rd and 2 run early where Quinshon Judkins got hit 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage by an unblocked safety coming through a gap and just refused to be tackled and got the first down entirely on his own. And then there was the play where Trevion Henderson got hit like 8 yards behind the line of scrimmage by a guy who came between Fryer and Shabola. And Shabola turned and was like kind of trying to chase the guy down. So I was like, okay, maybe I guess that was his responsibility. And Trevion, instead of getting dropped for a loss of 8, made it into a gain of 4, just like miraculously. And there's a part of that's their job too. But I thought there were times where it was like, oh, that was not blocked up great. And the backs kind of made it right. And The second touchdown to Carnell Tate, Josh Fryer got kind of smoked, and there was a guy diving at Will Howard's legs, and he just did not allow it to phase him. And I guess, was that an RPO? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was like
the second one.
So like,
yeah.
Like good read, good stay in the pocket, good delivery, touchdown to Carnell Tate, but Josh Fryer got beat pretty bad on that play. So I thought Shabola and Fryer were not awesome, and their grades aren't horrible, but reflected it some. And I think if Ohio State, so that was one of those where, right, Northwestern actually has pretty decent receivers, but there were a couple of those other plays where like the running backs were breaking tackles. Like, okay, when they play Indiana or Michigan or Oregon, like if they let that happen, those defensive players might make those tackles. And I just thought it was like, I thought Shabola and Fryer were a little iffy, maybe.
Yeah, the play where the Travion Henderson play where like the broadcast was like trying to pin it on Fryer. So like I think they said like Fryer got smoked. It's like Fryer didn't even try to block that guy. He was like stepping way out to his left.
Yes,
I think, or maybe to his right. I guess
he went between Fryer and Shabola, but I think it was Shabola's responsibility.
I think you probably needed a little more of a just like a shove from Fryer as he was making his way outside to help Shabola there. It just wasn't like a great combo block. Maybe the front messed with what they were trying to do there. It wasn't a great play. I did think there was a play. I wrote it down because I do like block of the week on KOTN. There was a play early in the game. They converted a 4th down on the opening drive where like Fryer and Shabola just like bulldozed their side of the line. Just like it was like bowling pins the way they knocked them over. So there's good and bad in there. I still think for as much as we've talked about losing Josh Simmons and what that might mean, the way things have shaken out, I still think we're very much in a place where the right side of the offensive line is probably more concerning than the left side of the offensive line with how Donovan Jackson and Carson Hinsman have settled in. I don't think it's like a glaring this isn't good enough situation, but you always worry about Fryer when he's playing guys that have speed, and Indiana has some good pass rushers. Mikal Kamara is very good. So that'll be a spot to watch this week. But I think the offensive line has been fine, has been more than good, I think, given the situation that it's in. But it's not perfect on every play. Like you're going to have some negative plays. You're going to need Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, I think, a couple times a game to do what they did against Northwestern, which was turn a 5-yard loss into a 3-yard gain kind of thing.
And you can go down the rabbit hole of, well, what if Ohio State didn't have Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, and Will Howard to handle those situations? It's like, I don't know. They'd be Purdue, but they do have those guys, so they have a good chance to win the national title. So their skill guys and their quarterbacks and running backs making the offensive line right a couple times a game is also part of who they are. So this is just, but I think I agree with the idea of like, actually that we now are at the point where it is a little more the right side of the offensive line than the left. And I also did want to note, can't remember exactly play. There was a play where like Bennett Christian made there were 2 great Bennett Christian blocks, I thought. One, like caving in a side of the line, and another one I think he got out like as a lead blocker in front of Travion. It was like, okay, like they really. And then I think Patrick Gerd in the goal line package helped lead on Quinshon Judkins' first touchdown, and they do have some. It's just it's interesting. It's a little bit like G. Scott and Jelani Thurman, a little more of the pass catchers, and then Bennett Christian and Will Kazmarek is out right now, but like Patrick Gerd, like they have some tight ends who can block. So I wanted to shout out Bennett Christian for I thought 2 really good plays on blocks.
Yeah, I guess I meant to mention this earlier and I forgot. So we get a question from Steve, which I actually thought was good to bring up because there's a little bit of a trend developing here, and maybe we can talk more about it when we preview the game later this week. But he said, I questioned some of the play calling on 3rd and 4th and short. Why is Chip Kelly calling passes? I say run the ball. What do you guys think? So I looked this up. Not good on 3rd down in this game, and they really have not been good on 3rd down since the Oregon game. 4 of 12 against Oregon, 1 for 10 against Nebraska, 6 of 12 against Penn State, which is fine. 5 of 12 against Purdue, and 4 of 10 against Northwestern. That's 35% conversion, including since the Oregon game. They're 8 of 11 on 4th down, so like they're making up for it in some instances by going forward on 4th down and converting. But I don't know that you want to live that way. I think you want to be more efficient on third down. They had 8 instances of third or fourth and 3 or shorter. So 8 third and fourth and short. 5 passes, 3 runs. Converted all 3 runs. One of 5 converting when they were throwing the ball. I likewise think that they probably I don't think you should be running 5 times or throwing 5 times on 8 short yardage instances. I wonder if they're trying to break tendency a little bit with doing that. Either way, it wasn't effective. It's got to be better. Like I think, that has been. We haven't talked about it much, honestly, but like 35% on third down is pretty stinking bad.
Right.
So they have to be much better on third down, I think, moving forward. And part of that, I think, is maybe having a better short yardage plan than they seem to have had the last couple of weeks, especially in this game. Like I think that's too many passes.
They really feel like they've sort of figured out the goal line stuff, though, with running the ball again, like that, like right, the Judkins, like the full house backfield, and you get it. Yeah. Like, can they run that in the middle of the field?
Yeah, they can. They did it against Oregon twice, I think. Yeah, and they have the sneak. The QB sneak has been effective for them too. They did not run Will Howard in this game. He had 1 carry. It was a quarterback sneak on the goal line that didn't get in.
That makes sense. So that's probably over. This was Will's last game of we're not going to run you.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. So like I don't know. They should be a better third down team than they have been just on the season. They're like 50th, I think, or 40th or something like that in the country in third down conversion rate. They're borderline top 10 in fourth down, which I think you have to mention when you talk about how inefficient they've been on third down. I think they're 11th in fourth down conversions.
Which is always then like, well, why didn't you run the fourth down play on third down?
Yeah. But I also think maybe it speaks to them having the answers they need to be more efficient in short yardage. In the bigger games, it's just like you do want to show a willingness to throw in those situations to keep defenses honest, but maybe I think they did do it a little too much against Northwestern.
I feel like at the nadir of the short yardage issues a couple years ago, they were throwing on third down out of desperation.
Yeah.
More than it was like, well, we definitely can't run it. We have very little chance to get this 3rd and 1 on the ground. So we're going to throw it. And I don't think it's that. Right? So maybe they're doing what you're saying just from like the decision-making of it. But I don't think this would show a lack of faith in the run game or a lack of belief or that there's anything statistically that shows a lack of production. Because you're saying when they have run it on those, they've made it and just haven't made it on the throws. So they know it. So then there's, I guess if you want to give them credit, like there's a reason they're doing it. And maybe you're right. It's a tendency breaker, but I think we've advanced way past the, oh my gosh, it feels like 3rd and a yard. It may as well be 3rd and 20 because they can't run the ball.
Right. I'm not there. I'm willing to give a little benefit of the doubt, I think. And a lot of that is because of what we saw against Penn State. When they had the run that convert a couple times and they got Will Howard involved, it's like they have multiple avenues to get that. Whereas, to your point, in years past, it's like if CJ Stroud doesn't throw the most accurate ball anyone's ever seen on 3rd and 2, then Ohio State's punting in this situation, kind of thing. So I don't think that's where they are.
What was it a Notre Dame game where they ran like a jet sweep to Buka? Yes. On the 3rd and short or something on a 4th down. And it was like, this is the bottom. They have no chance to line up and move the line of scrimmage and get the yards they need running the ball. This is rock bottom. And they are way better than that right now.
I think so. Yeah. That mostly wraps up the questions we had about the game. I did want to read. There was one person, I think it was Bill, who went to Wrigley and like said he did not have a good time. He didn't think it was a good presentation.
Interesting.
Said the PA announcer was kind of bad, but that was an outlier. The other people who were there said they enjoyed it. People who watched on TV, I think for the most part, thought it was cool. There was some stuff about like I thought it was cool. I don't really know what you're complaining about if you didn't think it was cool. Ian said that despite the challenges may have posed for the media and the team, there were no challenges for the media. Don't ever worry about that. Media is soft. Watching a game in Wrigley Field was fun as hell from a fan perspective. Great trip. We should do it again. I don't know. To straw poll. I don't know if people would want to do it again necessarily. And then Will, who was at the game, Will said, from Chicago, took my entire family to the game, including it being my 5-year-old's first game. Was an amazing atmosphere and really, really cool to see Ohio State playing at Wrigley Field. I know some were skeptical, but it was a great fan atmosphere and something my kids won't forget. Like, I thought it was cool. Like, now that it's in the rearview mirror, the field held up. No one was injured because of the field. I actually thought it was a pretty cool setting for an Ohio State football game.
I don't think Northwestern should play 7 games a year there and like decide to not build their stadium anymore and just play at Wrigley, but as a once in a lifetime opportunity. And Northwestern next year will do the same thing. They'll play like 4 or 5 home games in their lakeside thing and then play 1 or 2 at Wrigley. I think will be the plan. It's just Ohio State's not on the schedule for Northwestern next year, but like for a one-off here, now it's one of those, you're throwing money away probably, right? Because if you could play in a bigger stadium and get more tickets, but other than that, yeah. So, and again, neither you nor I went, and then like last night, you were kind of like, oh man, I kind of wish I had gone.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed. Yeah, I just thought, I mean, I like Chicago, I like Wrigleyville. It seemed like a good time. And I just thought like the sight lines were kind of cool, and I thought BTN actually did a nice job with their presentation of it too. So I don't know. I don't think I'm alone in thinking it was cool. I know there were some people who didn't love it, but I thought it was fine.
Speaking of, by the way, for the press, not to be a jackhole about this, but I just want to say, in the press box at Notre Dame Stadium, loaded baked potato soup. So
wow,
leave it there with a fixins bar. Just leave that there for everybody.
With a fixins, that's pretty great. That's pretty great.
Yeah, bacon crumbles. Yeah. So
I don't think I'm ever going to be the guy who complains about the free food that universities are nice enough to give us.
Yes,
whether it's good or bad, but man, when it's really good, it's a heck of a treat.
It's quite a pick me up for a long day of ball knowing. And again, we did this a lot on KOTN on Saturday night, but just the idea. I was really getting these vibes at Notre Dame, just the idea that between Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, Notre Dame, Penn State, the idea that the 4 first-round playoff games, 3 of them could be at the homes of those northern teams is just like a real opportunity, I think, to get excited about. So obviously one of those teams is going to win the Big Ten and will have a first-round bye. But otherwise, I think the idea that Notre Dame and 2 Big Ten teams host as the 5, 6, 7, 8 seeds, I think is really out there, and it's going to be awesome.
I saw late, or I guess early Sunday, the updated ESPN projections from Heather Dinich. And I know Ohio State fans just want Ohio State to go win the Big Ten championship and not have to worry about these kind of things. But the path that they laid out for Ohio State, which I'm assuming including a loss to Oregon in the rematch of the Big Ten championship, was hosting number 12 BYU, and then if you won that, advancing to play Boise as the 4 seed in I think it was the Fiesta Bowl.
Weird. Okay, yeah, people love making Boise the a bye team now, and I get it that the Big 12 champ's not going to be undefeated, but I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah, that would be weird that we were in a spot where it's like, what's the coolest path for Ohio State? It's like Bama, Georgia, Oregon. It's like, actually, no, it's BYU, Boise. And then somebody. It's like, I can't wait for the playoff where Ohio State will be playing the greatest teams in the land, classic matchups against Blue Bloods. The first playoff path is BYU and Boise. Wow. No offense to those teams. They're good at football and they have good players, but that is not. It's not the path that I envisioned.
Yeah, it's not what I had in my head when I thought about Ohio State in the 12-team playoff era. But there will be years, I think, where that happens. So we'll see. I think Ohio State would much rather win the Big Ten championship and go to the Rose Bowl and have a first round bye. So,
which definitely could happen. Because again, people watched it. Like Oregon had its most vulnerable game. They actually almost lost to Boise in week 2. So not quite its most vulnerable game, but absolutely we're on the ropes, without Tez Johnson, without Jordan Birch, without Marcus Harper, their right guard. But Wisconsin had them on the ropes for a while. So, it is not there's no assumption with Oregon as a Big Ten champ right now. They're an excellent team. They're an excellent team, but Ohio State's figured some stuff out since they played them.
Yep.
All right. So you're good?
We're good. Yep.
All right. So make sure you're sticking to the podcast feed all this week for all this Ohio State, Indiana preview coverage. I think it's still 10.5. It had been 10.5 on the early lines even before this weekend. And then I checked after, and as people know, Indiana was on a bye this week. After Ohio State won yesterday, it still was 10.5. So that's what we're looking at for Ohio State as a favorite against the Hoosiers. This, of course, is in Ohio Stadium. At noon. College game day is coming. Big noon's coming. It's always great when you have like the Anchorman showdowns in the parking lots between everybody. So we will then have a huge breakdown on Kings of Columbus on Wednesday. We will also have a huge Indiana-Ohio State breakdown on Kings of the North on Wednesday. So we will look forward to seeing you guys there. For now, thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yorostowski, for his help. And we appreciate you guys making us part of your Ohio State fandom. Otherwise, we're just two yahoos shouting into a microphone. It is still 10.5. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Sunday Sound Off on Kings of Columbus.